he's doing an incredible job on my campaign, and has represented me well across the state. And I'm also enormously grateful to my husband, Charles Walton, who not only accompanies me, and now when I go to events and he's not with me, people say, well, where's your husband? I like him more than me, but that's okay, because he is truly the politician of the family. He's from Raleigh, Shaw University grad, so shout out HUC. Shaw Bears, right?
All right, Shaw Bears.
But then he went, as he says, up south and landed in Providence, Rhode Island, and was the first African American to serve in the Rhode Island State Senate, which he did for 18 years. So he knows how to work a room, let me tell you. But I wanted to have an opportunity to serve the people in the state, and ran the first time in 2018 after 30 years as a civil rights attorney. So some of my perspective on why this month is so important is informed by that work. But what I wanted to share with you, my thoughts that the history of Black people in America has always been about the fierce urgency of liberation. And I would suggest to you that's still true. So my theme this afternoon for you is the fierce urgency of now, right? And that is the part of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech on the Mall that isn't quoted as much as the dream part. I will tell you that as I sat in the gallery of the US Capitol on Tuesday of this week and listened not only to the president's boast that, quote, we ended DEI in America, right? I also heard and saw the raucous and aggressive shouts and cheers and standing ovation that those words received from the members of Congress and most of the folks in the gallery. I heard the president demonize the Somali Americans, saying that they had plundered $19 billion from the American taxpayer, and referring to them as the Somali pirates who ransacked Minnesota. The racial hatred in those statements in that room was palpable.
Yes.
So this morning, and I'll tell you that speech was all about war and crime. I came out of that room thinking, we're going to war. We were glorified. I mean, I am thankful to the people. My brother served in the Army for 10 years. I am thankful to the people who put on the uniform and defend our country.
Yeah.
But the way that he was glorifying all of that was clear. And here we are, not even a week later, and we wake up this morning to learn that the United States is now at war with Iran. And so last night, while we slept, the Iranian parents were scrambling to collect their terrified children who were hiding under desks at their schools in Tehran as America bombed the city. And now Iran is retaliating and bombing countries throughout the region. So why do I talk about that, and how does that relate to you? Well, I really believe that what happens at the local level ultimately impacts what's happening in our nation. And that's in part because who we elect in North Carolina has impacted who's in Congress. So let me connect the dots for you. In 2022, the North Carolina Supreme Court said that extreme partisan gerrymandering violates your rights under the state constitution. So gerrymandering meaning drawing election districts in a way that results in an outcome that's not representative of the voting strength of the people who vote. And we've seen this in the past when at-large election systems were used to suppress the voting power of Black citizens, right? For the first 10 to 12 years of my career, I worked across the state suing counties because they had at-large election systems. Black voters might have been 20, 30% of the vote in the county, but because they were only 30% and the elections were at large, the white voters could always outvote the Black voters, right? So then we drew districts, singular districts, say 5 districts for 5 county commissioners, and in that county that was 20 or 30% Black, they could at least have 1 and sometimes have 2 representatives on the county commission when we drew districts. So that is a form of gerrymandering, Partisan gerrymandering is essentially the same thing, except you draw districts in a way that advantages one party and disadvantages the other. So we know that North Carolina is a purple state, pretty evenly divided. When our court ruled that gerrymandering is unconstitutional under the state constitution, the legislature had to redraw. And North Carolina sent 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans to Congress, because we have 14 congressional districts in our state. And that pretty much represents how people vote. We also have fairer legislative districts, state house and state senate. And then we had an election. Our court flipped. Previously it was 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans. It flipped in January of 2023 to be 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And the new court said, we're going to rehear that case, which is not what courts do. Once you issue a ruling, it's supposed to be final. But they said, we're going to take that same case back, and they didn't say the districts aren't gerrymandered. They said, we as a court have no power to do anything about it. So the legislature redrew, and in 2024, the state sent 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats to Congress. And you know that we have redrawn again, the legislature has, with the goal of sending 11 Republicans and 3 Democrats. All of the state that's both purple state. So, that is, if we had kept that 7-7 delegation, right now today, the House of Representatives would be in control of Democrats. And there would be an entirely different situation in Washington, with an entirely different ability to put a check and balance on what this president is doing, right? So, I can talk about education, which is so widely important. Again, a situation where the democratically controlled court said that the right under the state constitution to a sound basic education is one that the court must enforce. In 2022, we ordered that money be spent, millions of dollars over a period of years across the state to make sure that every student has access to a sound basic education in a uniform system of public education. And then the court flipped. They said, we're going to rehear that case. They put an immediate halt to that prior order. They said that we're going to stop that. That's not going to happen. A year later, we heard oral arguments, and in a dissent, I explained why we should not have reheard an issue we've already decided. And as I stand before you, it is almost March, 2 years later after we had those oral arguments, and there's still no decision from our court. So the money has still been held up. And as I've been going around the state, county after county, I'm seeing places where public schools are being closed, teachers are not getting the resources they need, and it kind of breaks my heart to see class after class of students in our public schools not getting the resources that they deserve under our Constitution. So, in addition to those big picture democracy issues, and remember, I served with 4 Republicans who ordered in the 2024 election that the votes of military and overseas voters be thrown out. And it was only a federal court. This was in the Justice Riggs election. A federal court stepped in and said you can't do that. But the challenge is that who we elect on our court ultimately determines who goes to Washington, impacts the entire country. But what I also know is that it's what you all will do at the local level that will make all the difference. So the other things our court decides, I think people don't realize, they know that we are responsible for public safety, right? Criminal justice, and that is an important part of what we do. But we also decide things like how much you pay for electricity, whether Duke Power can pass on to you, the consumer, the cost of cleaning up the coal ash that they put in our rivers. Right?
Exactly.
Whether you'll be fairly compensated if you're injured on the job. We make decisions about if you're uninsured and you go to the hospital in the emergency room and you're charged more than the insured patients, can you sue the hospital over that? The Republican majority on our court recently said no, you can't. So many ways in which we make decisions that impact your pocketbooks, impact whether or not you and your families will get justice. And unfortunately right now, we do not have a court that is committed to upholding your rights. I do not have a primary opponent, so if you haven't voted yet, I will not be on your ballot, on the primary ballot on Tuesday. But I do have an opponent in November. My opponent is Sarah Stevens. She is a 16-year veteran of the North Carolina legislature. She served in the House from Mount Airy. She has taken away all these rights that I'm suggesting to you are so important to protect. So she voted for districts that a court found were gerrymandered. She voted for a voter ID requirement that a court found was intentionally racially discriminatory. She voted to take away or to limit women's access to abortions. And even on the question of breast cancer, she opposed a bill that would require insurance companies to compensate women, to allow women to have the more advanced screening methods as well as mammograms. So even just basic things like that, and her comment was, well, it'll just be too burdensome for insurance companies. The bill has passed, I think, so she changed her vote. But that was my opponent's initial reaction. She is someone who has a record of not standing up for people's rights, and she's running on a platform where she's a constitutional conservative. And to that means to me that she is beholden to a political ideology, and whereas my commitment is to upholding the rights that are in the state and federal constitutions. So that's why I ask you to support me, and what I ask people to do, what I need your help with, in some ways, first and foremost, is spreading the word. I mean, you all, I am so grateful to you for being here this morning, learning about our courts, learning about why our courts matter, and now you can take that information out to the community, to the networks that you have. I know we have some elected officials here. Thank you so much for your service. I know we have party officials, and you have ways to get word out to people. So if my campaign can help with that, Elliot can get you material. We have some materials here, take all of that, we have more if you need it. But spread the word however you can about, in November, people need to vote down the entire ballot. What we've seen is in past elections, the Supreme Court races are always really close. Justice Sherry Beasley, Chief Justice Sherry Beasley, who was the first African-American woman to serve as Chief Justice on our court. You should know our court is now 206 years old. We've only ever had 7 African-Americans on our court. We're all still living. So that tells you how recent it's been. And Sherry Beasley was the first and only African-American woman to serve as Chief Justice. She had to run, she was appointed by Governor Cooper, and then she had to run to keep that seat, and she lost to Chief Justice Newby by 401 votes. So, you know, that is, I'm sure there are 401 votes in this room if we think about all the people that you know and people that you know who would come and vote. So, enormously close. Justice Riggs won by 734 votes out of 5.5 million votes cast across the state. So every vote in every county matters tremendously. And the thing I worry about this time is that all those things that Jefferson Griffin was trying to use to throw out those ballots in his race against Justice Riggs, those are all in place now. So the court said you can't change the rules of election after the election, but you can change them before the next election. So that means everyone has to have the last four of their social or their driver's license in their voter registration database in order to cast a ballot in North Carolina. So the Board of, and this is different from the Griffin list, the Board of Elections has compiled a list of some 80,000 voters who don't have that information. And frustratingly, it's not as simple as just checking if you're a registered voter. You have to go to the registration repair section on the Board of Elections website and make sure your name isn't on that list. Because if it is, you have to get your information to the Board of Elections. And you may have registered to vote through DMV. And so you would think that they would have given your driver's license number to the Board of Elections, but they may not have. Lots of glitches in getting data from one computer system to another. So check your name on go to the Board of Elections website, check your name on the registration repair site, check your relatives' names. But we have to get everyone, it's another hurdle to being able to be registered and vote. And right now, only about 25% of those people have done what they need to do. And I'll tell you, most of that's in some of the more smaller rural red counties. These lists are disproportionately Democrats, voters of color, students, and women. That's who's caught up in this registration affair. The other problem is now the Board of Elections has sent out letters. So even if you have all that data, they are now taking that data and matching it to another governmental database. And so they have sent letters to 241,000 voters in the state. Has anyone here gotten one of these letters that says your voter registration doesn't match a government database? And it says at the bottom of the letter, it's very intimidating, big border in black letters, furnishing false information in response to this letter is a felony. I've talked to several people who've gotten these letters, and they're quite intimidated, right? And so our task is to, instead of allowing this to be a vote suppression tactic, we have to turn it into voter mobilization and motivation, right? We have to help people understand that they're trying to take your right to vote away because they know it really matters. And I still believe in this democracy that it's the power of your vote that is a check, the only ultimate check on what our North Carolina legislature is doing, on what our North Carolina Supreme Court is doing, on what Congress is doing, and certainly at the local level. So you really hold the power in your hands. And getting the word out to people you know is incredibly important. You can sign up to volunteer for my campaign on my website. It's earls4justice.com, so earlsforjustice.com. You can also donate. I have been working really hard to have a grassroots campaign. My average donation contribution is like $500. I know, and that's average. So I have some big money donors too, but that's average. My opponent's average contribution is $5,000. So you can see who is supporting her, right? But it really helps me tremendously. $25, $50, whatever you can contribute will help my campaign continue to be a grassroots campaign. And that will help me reach voters. So how do I use that money? Well, I have Elliot. I have a staff that's helping me get around the state. I need to get ads on social media. I need to put ads on TV. We have 7 media markets in this state. So that means 7 different places I have to pay to get my face on TV. So that's, the resources really matter. I want to put my ads on radio, in black newspapers, and all these places want me to pay them to do that. So that's really important. And then I would say the third thing is to remember that we have to vote all the way down the ballot. Interestingly, if you look at the data, people who vote Republican vote all the way down the ticket. But people who vote for the Democrat at the top of the ticket, whether they're unaffiliated, Democrat, whatever, they don't vote all the way down. They just leave the lower races blank. And I understand it. You know, filling in those bubbles, it's like shades of high school. It's some test that you didn't actually study for. I get it. But as long as people understand how important it is. You know, Roy Cooper can do some things if he's in the U.S. Senate, but if we can get a court that will enforce your rights and have a delegation from North Carolina that represents our voting strength, that gives Congress the power to do a lot more. So I tell people, the further you go down the ballot, the closer you get to your front door. It really matters. So those are my asks. And now, yes, I would love to take some questions. Do people have questions for me?